A picture worth 1,000 shames. Analyzing just how far the perverse failure of black motherhood has been allowed to go. Available now on Patreon for all paying Sneak Peek and Brian's Corner Club members. For $7 to $10 a month, you gain exclusive access to all content on Patreon, not yet made available on other platforms. Sign up today.
Police say this man is a murderer. Now they want to know if he's also a racist and if his crime against this young woman, 20-year-old Jody Gaye Bailey, was triggered by racial hatred.
We are having a hard time proving that or being able to charge anybody in a hate crime. It's going to be up to the state attorney's office to determine what, if any, additional charges will be filed.
All right, Mr. Bullich, a warrant's been issued.
This morning, Robert R. Baltock making a court appearance and denied bond. Baltock was arrested last night. Police say he's the man who harassed Bailey while she was riding in a car with her boyfriend shortly before 4 a.m. last Wednesday in Oakland Park. Baltock allegedly pulling up next to the interracial couple at the intersection of Northeast 6th Avenue and Oakland Park Boulevard, then using his 9mm gun to fire a number of rounds right at their car, one of the bullets going straight through the passenger side window, striking Bailey in the head, killing her.
I'm happy that somebody is caught, and I'm praying that this person is going to be able to tell the police the truth, why he did it, what was his motive.
Police able to track Baltock down after getting a tip from someone who recognized him from the police composite sketch. When authorities first caught up with him Friday, they say they spotted something right away that convinced them Baltock was the man they were looking for.
While we were speaking to him out in front of his house, one of the FDLE agents looked down and saw on the grass in front of his house a 9mm casing. This is the same caliber of the weapon that was used on the scene to commit the homicide.
Baltock authorities say has not cooperated with the police investigation, but after he was arrested last night, police executed a search warrant at Baltock's Sunrise home, confiscating computer equipment and other evidence they'll use to try to prove their case against him.
Jody Gaye Bailey's parents listen as a Broward County medical examiner describes the fatal gunshot wound to their daughter's head.
The unburned flakes of gunpowder that also traveled from the muzzle of the gun with the bullet to embed in her skin. The bullet itself continued through her skull.
Prosecutors trying to prove that 24-year-old Robert Baltush set out to kill a black person in February of 1999. 20-year-old Bailey riding along Oakland Park Boulevard with her white boyfriend, his perfect target.
You have a problem with black people?
No, I do not.
Were you targeting this woman? Were you anywhere in that area?
Baltush's body tattooed in racial symbols, cleaned up and covered up in court.
but not no more. When will you learn that I got feelings? You never know until it happens to you. Being broken, easy falling down
What's going on, guys? So before we get to tonight's subject matter at hand, I would first like to strongly encourage you to click the link, which is in the description box and should also be in the pinned post. Another one of my masterpieces, controversial masterpieces, posted as a pay-per-view only content on Patreon. In this video, we're going to touch upon a very touchy subject, which is black thoughts taking sexually suggestive, I won't even say that, inappropriate pictures with their children, and specifically their male children, while the child is still small. In this video on Patreon, which again is a pay-per-view, I present essentially a double feature where I show two very, in my mind at least, disturbing examples of this. And if you are not offended or questioning the first, you will certainly be offended by and question the second, especially if you are a reasonable parent. We delve into this issue to really expose the ongoing issue of thoughdism in American culture and in the very fabric of Black America, which has been interwoven with, unfortunately, who we are as so-called African Americans, to the point where ass backwards mentality, including whoredom and hypersexualization, is not only second nature, but it has been normalized and become routine. So, not to give too much away, but I do really go in on the paint on this double feature. Make sure you click the link in the description box and also in the pinned post. If I remembered to do so, I also made sure to put it in a community post before this video. Definitely a controversial topic that I believe needs to be directly addressed. Now, as far as tonight's subject, you've seen the title, and I gotta tell you, I am proud to announce that I am now able to produce this video commentary regarding this subject, because, as few of you may remember, I have been hunting down this story for the past 4 years. For those of you who don't recall, it was back in late 2020, I believe it was, when I started to reminisce on a case, a murder case, that I thought I remembered happened in 1996, though I didn't recall where, that I had thought I had heard about while reading one of those little vintage miniature jet magazines, where they had an article about the story in one of their magazines. And for some reason, because when I was a kid, you know, some of my relatives on my mother's side, they had collected hundreds of jet magazines. I knew I had seen it in a magazine. My memory was misleading me to believe that it was a jet magazine, because in my free time when I was off from school, you know, I was a bit of a loner, and one of my favorite things to do would be to collect and look into magazines and newspapers. This was before, you know, the internet really got going big. And so somehow all I could remember is that I came across this case. I did not remember the year specifically. Again, I thought it was 96. I did not remember the state, but I knew it was in the United States. And I did not remember exactly where I saw it. But again, for some reason, I had assumed it was one of those little miniature mags that Jet used to publish. It's really a shame what happened to Jet Magazine on a side note. Great company. One of the most notable original black-owned organizations and franchises in American history. Sad that, like everything else black, they got bought out by white supremacy, but nonetheless. So, for some reason, 4 years ago in 2020, because, you know, I first heard of this story all the way back sometime in the 90s when I saw it. And it always stuck with me because at the time, you know, the Negro bedwenching trend wasn't big. I was far from thinking about love or relationships, let alone interracial relationships. I couldn't have been any more than, 14, 15, 16 years old when I saw this. So I don't know. I guess the concept of interracial dating and, you know, racist violence was still somewhat foreign to me. You know, I grew up in a predominantly black part of South suburban Chicago. There were a few whites and Hispanics at the time still straggling around. They couldn't afford to or just chose not to take white flight. Like on our block in our neighborhood where I grew up, there were only 3 white families, a total of 4 white homeowners, and 1 Hispanic family back in the 90s and the early 2000s. The rest of them saw the niggas coming down from the city, and they decided to get the hell out of Dodge. They either moved further southwest like Naperville, or they moved all the way out west, or they moved all the way up north, or they ran over to Indiana. But anyway, so, you know, I didn't grow up in a very cosmopolitan area with a mix of a lot of different races, and that word is cosmopolitan is going to come up as a irony in a moment here. So, you know, again, the concept of swirling and, you know, selling out your race and, you know, racism to the point of you know, violence, including, you know, murder and neo-Nazism and skinheadism. You know, I was not exposed to that type of stuff at the time. So when I'm looking at this article and I'm looking at these pictures and I'm reading it, you know, just one of dozens of articles that I used to read back in the day. It was so weird to me that it caught my interest because I had never seen or heard of anything like this. Both the precursor, of, two people of a different race in what they claimed was a loving relationship, or what happened thereafter, right? So shit happened. I go through junior high school, I go through high school, or my version of high school, subject for another video. I go through college, I forget about the story completely. What, like a fucking 2 decades go past, and it's like, I completely forget about the subject. But something triggered me. It might have been a story that I was doing at the time in 2020. Something triggered that part of my memory that had long ago been forgotten and lost. And I remembered this story. And for some reason, all of a sudden, I felt this new energy to hunt down this story. One of my little things that I like to do, I like the challenge of hunting down stuff that I half remember, but I can't fully remember it. So it becomes a challenge to me to try to hunt down the details and try to, fully reminisce and recall and recover that memory of, something from my long ago past, whether it's something that happened to me directly or something that I heard about that intrigued me at the time. So I constantly go on these crusades of trying to dig up old stuff that I only remember a few details of it, but maybe not the full name. I only remember the face, but not the name at all. I only half remember the story, but somehow I remember enough of it to, do a Sherlock Holmes type of thing where I can put enough pieces of the puzzle together, which to the point where usually in a few days to a few weeks, I can fully, I have, like in that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vanessa Williams, I have total recall of, whatever I half forgot about. So, in 2020, I think somewhere around September or October of 2020, I took to the community post section of my channel here at Brian Too Bad TV Solange, and I posed a question to all of you. And I don't know how many of you saw it, but I did get 34 thumbs up, but only 2 responses. The question that I made in the community post was, and I quote, "Need help finding this story, : Hey folks, this is a first. So in spite of my historianism, I am at a total loss trying to find names and information of a story that I vaguely recall from the 1990s about a black female co-ed that was shot and killed, I believe by a neo-Nazi during a drive-by shooting in what I believe was a road rage incident. I'm not sure, but I believe she was a swirler who had a white boyfriend that was drag racing with the white supremacist before the shooting, and he was aiming for the other white dude, not her. I know this is very vague, but anyway, the story made national headlines. I don't remember the year or the names, but I remember seeing a small article about it in Jet magazine as a kid. Does anyone at all remember anything like this? Your help finding this story would be much appreciated." And so I sat back because, by this time, like I told you guys before, I love a challenge. The unfortunate thing for me was I remembered the face of a black girl in the article very vividly. Okay. And I remembered another picture of some people at like a memorial service or, some type of gathering after the fact very vividly. And I remembered a summary of the story, but unfortunately, I could not remember the name. And also, unfortunately, so much has happened between now and when this happened that it was a very hard thing to Google search without a full name of a victim or, the perpetrator that was involved. Because while it did make national headlines, it wasn't as big as, like, say, the O.J. Simpson trial. Not by a long shot. Okay? Or George Floyd, for that matter. It was like one of those things that, it made the evening news, and then the next day they were talking about something else. Okay? So I was basically stuck. I realized I need a name to go with this face that is in, that I've been able to reminisce on. Otherwise, I got nothing. I went to Google and, I typed in the summary of some things that I could vaguely remember about the case, like young black college co-ed killed by neo-Nazi in drive-by shooting. I didn't even remember the state. That was the other thing that was really hurting me. At one point, I thought it was Georgia, but I couldn't remember the state either. So something from that far back in, like the 90s, unless it was like big news, like the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing or TWA Flight 800 or the Oklahoma City bombing or, something like that. You just, or Kasparov losing to, a supercomputer known as Deep Blue, all that crazy shit that was going on in the 90s, death of Princess Diana. Unless it's something on that level, you're not going to be able to find it in a Google search. There are special websites that archive newspapers and news articles and televised news reports like Conus Video, but you would still need something to go on. Okay. A lot of this stuff, short of filing a Freedom of Information Act, a lot of it is lost forever to history, unfortunately, unless you really know where to look. So, that's basically where I was at with that. So, a couple of you brothers did respond, but didn't really give me much help. You just commented, I guess what you could recall. One of you brothers said, quote, "I haven't the foggiest idea. I can only recall racial situations from the 90s that involved black men like Yusuf Hawkins in New York and James Byrd in Texas. Both of those guys were lynched for being involved with white women." And then another person said, "I hope someone can help him. I would love to hear more about that story." So, basically I saw I only got 2 responses. 34 thumbs up, but only 2 responses. I think somebody else had emailed me a link of a double murder case back in the 90s where a married black couple had been murdered in Florida by a white man, but it was completely unrelated to the case that I was talking about. So time went on. After 2020, I worked on other projects, went through the ups and downs of life, and all the crazy stuff that happened in between. Some of the stuff you guys know about, some of it you don't know about. And I forgot about the story again. Wasn't thinking about it. I had kind of given up, not in the sense that I had given up looking. I just, it had slipped my mind again and I went on to something else. So what happened was, I would say about 6-7 months ago, for the longest period of time, I was operating out of 2 offices. In 2019, I had moved into my larger office that I'm in now, but I had a smaller office that I was using as well that I had a little longer. And I decided, it was costing too much, so I decided to, just go ahead and just get rid of it in the month-to-month lease that I had with it, and just move into the larger office with all my stuff. This smaller office location, it had a little basement area Okay. And in the basement area, I had a lot of stuff stored away that, I had no immediate use for, that, I probably wasn't going to deal with for quite some time unless something came up where I specifically needed it. It was one of those situations where, I was storing stuff that I didn't feel was trash, so I didn't throw it away. It wasn't stuff that I want to give away or sell because it was part of, my memories, my some of my fondest childhood memories. And so I just decided to store it. So some of the shit I had not seen for years, like my graduation gown, my first baseball cap when I was 8 years old. A lot of different things from my childhood. But one of these things was a box full of magazines. Let me tell you, when I was in my early to mid teens, I was a magazine freak. I loved collecting magazines. When we're kids, I guess it's just part of, the development of the mind. A lot of us, especially a lot of boys, we collected things, bottle caps, baseball cards, basketball cards, sneakers. You think about all the stupid shit. I used to collect crickets and grasshoppers, earthworms, all kinds of weird shit. But one of the things I like to collect a lot of were magazines. Now, it wasn't just that they were magazines. A lot of these were I collected these magazines because they had, what I felt at the time were pretty ladies in them, either on the cover or, in one of the articles on the magazines. And I will admit, when I was a younger teenage kid, I had a thing for Hollywood white chicks. I just did. Everybody from vintage, Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor, all the way up to, Callista Flockhart. You name it. Nicole Kidman. I just had a thing for blonde hair, blue eyed, and sometimes brunette white bitches. Thankfully, I grew out of that. But at the time when I was 14, 15 years old, that was just my fucking thing in, the early 2000s. So I'd go to stores, shopping malls. I collect these magazines, everything from the Vogue cover when Penelope Cruz made the cover of Vogue back when she was the big thing in Hollywood, to the lowrider magazines with the little Latin chica bimbos posing next to the lowrider Cadillacs that the Hispanic and the Mexican dudes be fixing up and putting those tires on and putting the springs in so they bounce up and down in those lowrider competitions. And I was just buying up all kinds of different magazines from different companies. And so I had a box full of these magazines in my basement of my smaller office. So I, just out of curiosity, again, some of this shit I haven't fucked with in 15 to 20 years. So, I just had one of those, flashbacks to the past moments. And I just spent a couple of hours going through a couple of hundred magazines, just flipping through them, looking through the pages. And one of the things that I thought about was how in great shape a lot of these magazines still were, almost perfectly preserved from the day that I bought them. Okay. By the way, Ashley Judd, she was another white bitch. Like, she was another one that was really big on my list. Like, I had a huge crush on Ashley Judd when I was a kid, but she a fine bitch anyway. So I'm looking through these mags, looking through them, just flipping through them, not taking anything really serious, just, having some fond memories, some strange flashbacks. And for some reason, I don't know what the hell happened, but somehow I get to the last magazine after flipping through all these. I must have flipped through easily 150 magazines that I collected between 1999 and like 2009. Okay. And I get to this last magazine in the box. And I started to say, it's Cosmopolitan. And I have this overriding urge not to look in it. Because, my mind is shifting to something else. I was thinking about going out to get Starbucks. And, I had just kind of grown bored with, flipping through all these mags. But then something said, you've gone this far. What is it going to hurt you to do one more fucking magazine? So I decided, okay, what could it hurt? I might as well finish what I started, right? I started it, let's finish it. So I'm flipping through this mag, and about 3/4 of the way through the magazine, I come upon this article. I'm flipping through every page just like I did on all the other magazines. Some of which, like the very first magazine that I bought, which was a Maxim with Melissa Joan Hart on it, the white Hollywood hoe that used to play Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Sometimes I'll stop on a page when I see an article of, a girl that, brings me flashbacks that, I used to have a crush on this bitch. You know what I'm saying? Or, I remember this article. I shared that with my dad or one of my friends. But I'm on this last magazine in the box. I'm flipping through it. And I shit you not, dude. I open onto this beige page. And instantly, I come across on page 212. I'm sorry, this magazine was very long. It was over 200 pages long. But on page 212, about 3/4 of the way through, I come across this page entitled Death of a Dream Girl. And I look at the picture, and it's a picture of a white man in an orange jumpsuit and a cheesing black girl with a big ass grin. This dark skinned black girl. And underneath it says racial killer gets life term. And I'm saying to myself, holy fuck, dude, because again, you may have heard me say this in the past. I am great with faces. I'm not good with names. If I wasn't as good with remembering a face as I am and have been my entire life, the gravity of this find, of this discovery, would have escaped me to the point where I probably would have kept flipping pages. Okay? But as soon as I saw her, I didn't recognize him right away. But as soon as I saw her, my memory woke up. That part of my memory woke up out of hibernation, which it had only done once before in the last 2 decades, when I posed that question to y'all in the community post. And I said, oh my God, this is the fucking story. That is the girl that I remember from so long ago that stuck with me. That story when I was 14 or 15 years old, when I saw that in a magazine. And it wasn't Jet magazine. It wasn't from the collection that I got into from the relatives on my mom's side when she helped one of them move out and they never came to collect some of their moving boxes, and it had a bunch of mags in. This is a magazine that I went to the store and bought with money that I got from a little summer job. That's where I saw this fucking story. I shit you not. It was in a summer edition of the Cosmopolitan. It was in the April 2001 Cosmopolitan issue. And this magazine that I had was as in close to perfect shape. Everything from the cover, the little edges were a little rough, but the cover and all of the pages were almost in perfect condition. I think because they used a special ink and a special kind of paper back then. You know how they say, that they don't make anything the way they used to. But this magazine was so perfectly preserved that it was like every detail, not only of that page, but of the magazine, was almost as fresh as the day that I bought it. Even smelled the same way. And for those of you who are not magazine collectors or newspaper collectors, you probably won't come to appreciate this. But I looked at that girl's face and I said, oh my God. I remember this. And it had such a significance, not only because finally, after more than 20 years, I can now recall and revisit a story from my childhood that stuck with me and intrigued me, and yes, even puzzled me. But it has it has so much more of a significance to me now as a seasoned adult because of the environment and the atmosphere that we live in as Black people today. The story of this case was really a precursor of so many things to come in the second millennium, and more specifically the 2000 teens and the 2020s. It was so tragically ahead of its time, I suppose you could say. And now being able to accurately reminisce on this, I can say that this indeed was perhaps, if not the first, it had to, if it was not one of the first swirler cases of a swirler meeting a tragic end at the hands of a white man, it was the first highlighted case, or one of the first highlighted cases, but I'm pretty sure it was the first highlighted cases of such a thing. So what basically happened was this young lady, this college student named Jody Gaye Bailey, who was 20 years old. She was from the Boca Raton, Florida area. She originally, her and her family were from Jamaica. They moved to the United States when she was 11 years old. She started attending high school in the Boca Raton area. And there at her high school, she met this white boy by the name of Christian Martin, also 20 years old, but not at the time when they met. Now, before they had met each other, she actually had a black boyfriend that she had, been dating for about a year, from 1995 until they broke up in 1996. And so when she broke up with that boyfriend, at least according to people that were familiar with this case, she wasn't really looking for anything, but she was an exceptionally bright student in her high school. So she took on, for extra credit, she took on a tutoring program where she would tutor other students that needed help. And one of the fellow students in her school that she tutored was Christian Martin, this white boy. And so, excuse me. while tutoring this dude, apparently they became friends, and then best friends, quote unquote. And then when she broke up with her black boyfriend, she decided to skip her senior prom. But Christian Martin, who was growing a liking to Jody Bailey, he decided to ask her, or he convinced her to go to the prom, and said that they would just go as friends. So he was luring her. He convinced her to go to the prom and said, we can just go as friends. So she begrudgingly agreed, okay, let's go as friends. And he claims that when he went to her house to pick her up, and keep in mind this was in 1997, a few months after she broke up with her first boyfriend. When he went to her house, it was as if he saw an angel of the Lord to pick her up for the prom. She was in this beautiful purple dress, and she had her weave done, and he thought she was just so beautiful. So they go to the prom, they have a good time, and after that, they kind of sort of do what people call falling in love. And they got so-called first date jitters. So, after prom, they became closer friends, and they became what they call inseparable, right? Seeing each other after class, making out, doing all the stuff that, romantic lovebirds claim to do, including, these so-called swirlers, or at least that's what we call them now. And then, at some point, shortly after prom, they decided to kind of make it official and start, dating exclusively. And so then both of them graduate from high school, and they move on to go to college. Now, keep in mind, they had been dating for over a year at this point, and, doing what, romantic college couples do. We know what that means, right? And so by the time they get to college, she has her eyes set on Florida Southern or Southern Florida University or something like that. She wants to major in health administration. He's going to Florida Atlantic University. Now, Southern Florida University is down in Tampa, and Florida Atlantic University is up closer to Boca Raton. So they're going to be some distance away from each other while going to college. Now, keep in mind that Jody Bailey, she received a scholarship because of her 4.0 grade average to go to Southern Florida, or Florida Southern University. Okay? So that means she didn't have to pay tuition. So she basically was getting a free ride into school. She came from a family of, apparently, even though they came from Jamaica, which is kind of like a third world island nation, she came from a family of overachieving Caribbean Negroes. Her father was an electrical technician and got a job almost as soon as they got off the boat and came over here. Her mother was a registered nurse. Her older brother, when he came over here, he joined the U.S. Marines. Her other brother had just graduated from college the same year that she was starting her freshman year in college. So the entire family seemed to be well educated and well kept. And her with a 4.0 GPA, she was a very bright student. Like I said, she had tutored other kids in school. She got straight A's. She was very intelligent, so it was no problem. It would have been no problem for her breezing through college, being given a free run with this scholarship. But during her junior year, I guess she got, zaddy sick. You know how they say seasick? She got zaddy sick, and she decided to switch over to her boyfriend's university, which was Florida Atlantic University, from the University of South Florida, because, well, she used the excuse that they had health administration. They had a program that she could transfer to, more easily transfer to there to get her master's degree at Florida Atlantic in health administration. But if you ask someone, what's the more credible school, especially if you're getting a fucking scholarship there, between Florida Atlantic University and the University of South Florida, they're going to obviously say the University of South Florida. But again, she wanted to be next to, her white boyfriend, so she transferred over there so they could spend more time together. Now, this has a brutal irony in it, because you've heard me in the past and other content creators mention about how, these black females, these, black girls and black women, they deify and worship whiteness so much to the point where they are willing to make sacrifices to be with that white man, okay, up to and including the point of embarrassing themselves, or even, downgrading. They're always talking about leveling up. The black female is literally willing to level down, okay, to be with her white master, okay? Again, if we go to the credibility of these two schools, okay, I can guarantee you, hardly knowing anything about the state of Florida, okay, but just knowing what the little bit that I've heard about the University of South Florida, USF is a much more credible school than Florida Atlantic University, which is like a really big college, okay? Never was there any mention at all, through everything that I read, all the articles, both in this magazine and online digital news articles from back then. I didn't see anything about the white boyfriend, Christian Martin, even contemplating transferring over to her school, which would have been an upgrade for him from Florida Atlantic University to USF, either because, he didn't have the qualifications to go there, or simply because he didn't want to, okay? She was willing to downgrade her schooling, abandon her scholarship and everything, unless she was able to get her scholarship transferred. I'm not quite, because I personally paid my way through school, so I don't know how that works. Maybe somebody with more knowledge can, inform me, give me some information on that. But I don't think if you get a scholarship specifically to go to a specific school, I don't think you can transfer that scholarship. I don't think so. I could be incorrect, okay? But if we just go on, the precipice that she not only abandoned USF, which was the better school, she abandoned her scholarship, which means now she's going to have to get a part-time job, or her parents are going to have to help her with tuition. She did all of that, just to impress and be in the arms and be closer to White Zaddy. So she was putting him ahead of her education, ahead of her free ride through school, something that I seriously doubt, even as a Jamaican immigrant, where 99% of the people, from that island nation are black. I seriously doubt that she would have done that for the black boyfriend that she broke up with in 96, or any black man for that matter. Because, the Negro, in the eyes of the black female, probably even back then, they probably had similar attitudes as these bitches do now. He's supposed to pull himself up by his own bootstraps. He's supposed to be muscle chiseled with a six-pack. He's supposed to know how to cook, know how to clean. He's supposed to have a job making 6 figures a year. He's supposed to have a PhD, a master's degree, an ABC, and a 1, 2, 3 from 3 or 4 fucking colleges. And you can guarantee ain't no black female getting dick from some Negro, even if he is a high achiever. She's not about to leave her school just because they're in a long distance relationship to be with him. Either he's gonna have to come over to her, or she just gonna find dick from somebody else, or they just gonna maintain that long distance relationship. So given the nature of this story, okay, not doing what people call victim blaming, but this section of this story converts this entire issue from a irony into a brutal irony. Because when she chose to go back out to eastern Florida, southeast Florida, and be with White Zaddy, and downgrade to FAU from FSU, she unknowingly put herself in harm's way. Had she stayed at FSU and either maintained their long distance relationship, or had say, hey, why don't you consider transferring out here to USF? If he was, he might just not have been smart enough, or he might just not have been able to afford the tuition to go to FSU, okay, out in Tampa, which is literally on the other side of Florida, in like northwest or north central Florida. Then, this entire thing may have never happened. Some people would say, random events, you can't predict random events. That's true. But the question is, did the love for White Zaddy indirectly lead to her ultimate, demise? And the question of that, I'll let you answer that for yourself. So, once she went over there, they were able to see each other more, but they were still extremely busy with school, and both of them had a part-time job. Now, at the same time this is happening, up near Boca Raton, on the other side of town, there's this guy who is the quintessential loser at life. The polar opposite of these two individuals, specifically Jody Gaye Bailey, and his name is Robert Boltush, or Robert Boltush. He's a 23-year-old high school dropout that works at a beach pier restaurant in the Boca Raton area as a cook. And he's battling alcoholism. He goes out sometimes with his friends and family members, but he's really wayward. He doesn't have anything really going for him in life whatsoever. He's just kind of adrift. He got kicked out of the house by his stepdad a couple of times. He lives with his mom in the basement. Just your quintessential nobody, right? He's basically adrift in life. He's miserable with life, and completely unrelated to this interracial swirler couple in Christian Martin and Jody Gaye Bailey. These people don't know each other at all. They don't know each other from a can of paint. But one day, about a week after Valentine's Day, Jody Gaye Bailey and Christian Martin, now both Florida Atlantic University students, they decide to go out for a night on the town. A long night out on the town. After meeting up with each other and doing the hokey pokey, though the article said that they studied all evening. Yeah, they studied all evening. The case was that they had missed being together on Valentine's Day because both of them had very important school schedules, and they also had part-time jobs. So a whole week went past before they could find enough free time to get together, and they decided to more than make up for it on the night of February 23rd, 1999. Now, by this time, they had both been dating and ucking each other for 2 years. Okay, so this was nothing new, but it was even going to the same school. It had been some time since they had been able to explore one another. So they figure, it's a week after Valentine's, we're gonna make up for lost time. So they spend the evening at his dorm, doing what they do. And then for some strange reason, at this part I still don't understand, they decide to go out at midnight and try to find a coffee shop where she could buy a cappuccino or something like that. And this is perplexing because even though Starbucks was back then, what the fuck coffee shop stays open past midnight? I don't know. But this is what Christian Martin recalled on the night of February 23rd going into midnight February 24th. So they drove around the suburban Boca Raton area in his car all night, practically, nearly all night, looking for a coffee shop that was open instead of just waiting until the morning when the sun rose, right? And this is kind of where dumb ideas or pointless ideas, kind of can get you into trouble, because I don't know what they were doing when they was at his dorm. I don't know if they were getting high or whatever the fuck was going on. And this is not to be facetious, but who the fuck thinks that a fucking coffee shop is gonna be open at the dead of night? Nowadays you can't even go to Walmart after midnight. But nonetheless, so they go out looking for a coffee shop going into the morning of the 24th. They can't find the coffee shop. So they decide to stop in a Boca Raton suburb called Oakland Park, Florida. They stop at the gas station and figure, well, since they can't find a nice coffee shop, they'll try a coffee machine in the gas station. They buy the coffee, they drink the coffee. He recalled that she spit the coffee out and said it was terrible. It tasted nothing like the Frappuccino or Cappuccino, whatever the fuck, that she had tasted before, because he exclaimed that just a few months ago she had tried cappuccino for the first time and really liked it. So, he was going to buy her a cup, but they couldn't find a place to get a cup, right? So instead of going home, instead of going back to his place or her place or dropping her off or whatever, right, they decide that the bright thing to do is to drive around the city in the dead of night for the next 3 fucking hours. So for three and a half hours after, the disappointment of not being able to find their coffee, they're driving all around the greater Boca Raton area, just doing whatever, I guess, just joyriding. And he said during that time period, they're talking with one another, and they're talking about everything from the past, how they first met, how they fell in love, to the future. They're talking about having little mixed race babies. He was talking about how they was having kids. They had also discussed secretly getting engaged, and they were going to reveal their engagement in the summer of that year, which was just a few months away. They was going to reveal it to both sides of their family. And so, they're getting all their future plans together, and they're, just having conversation while joyriding. And then they pull up to this intersection. Now, put a pause on that for a second, because this is kind of where, weird, unexpected happenings can intersect. Especially, when you're not expecting the unexpected. Now, remember, I told you about this Robert Boltush dude. Okay, nobody, high school dropout, burger flipper, or some type of cook at a restaurant at a Boca Raton beach pier restaurant. He really has nothing going for himself. He lives with his mama. He's obviously a person that's a candidate for being frustrated with life. Well, Robert Boltush is also affiliated with a neo-Nazi skinhead group known as the Sharpskins. He has a tattoo representing them and everything. The issue is the Sharpskins are a non-violent and non-racist affiliate of the American skinhead movement. They actually, at the time, they speak out against racism and racial discrimination. They were part of the original intent of skinheads that migrated over to the United States from England and the United Kingdom, which was basically to enjoy punk rock music, wear weird goth clothes, have spiked bald haircuts, and have a lot of nose and earring piercings. Racism didn't get involved in that movement until it migrated over here. Okay, so the Sharpskins were not considered by the FBI to be a extremist group. However, Mr. Boltush harbored racist beliefs, and although he was affiliated with the Sharpskins, he also had been in contact with some of the more militant skinhead and white supremacist groups, like World Church of the Creator, which was the group that Rampage killer Benjamin Smith was a member of. And for those of you who are from the Chicagoland area, you may recall that a few months after this incident in Florida, Benjamin Smith would go on to infamously murder former Illinois NCAA basketball coach Ricky Birdsong outside of his home in northwestern suburban Chicago, kill a Asian college student at the University of Indiana, and wound 6 Orthodox Jews when he went on a tri-state shooting spree in July of 1999. And there were a lot of shooting sprees in 1999, including Columbine, and the day trader killings in Atlanta that same month in July. So Mr. Boltush wasn't a member of, but he had come in contact with World Church of the Creator, some of the other more militant neo-Nazi skinhead groups, though he was directly affiliated with the Sharpskins. So he was kind of like a closeted racist. He had made mentionings in the past of not wanting to work with black people on some of the menial dead end jobs that he had worked. He had made mentioning of being picked on by black guys at school. He had also made a big deal about how he felt like he had lost a girlfriend when he was 16 to a black school jock, and he got taunted about it, and he had hatched this plan to ambush and kill this dude, but that plan never evolved into fruition. So essentially, this dude was a hateful, angry, young, impressionable white cracker that, just like a lot of these niggas out here on the streets doing all manner of violent criminal things. He did not have much direction in life. He had a troubled upbringing as a kid. Didn't see much of his father. And, he turned to substance abuse, and he turned to extremism, but he was part of this skinhead group that claimed to be non-violent. So he was kind of like a confused motherfucker, okay, with some hate in his heart. So while the little swirler couple, Christopher Martin and Jody Bailey, are off on their joyride, Robert Boltush is at a bar with the mother of this woman, this white woman that he off and on has been dating for the last couple of months. I don't know where the off and on girlfriend was, but he was with her mother and two of his co-workers at this place, at this restaurant where he was a cook. They went bar hopping out in the Boca Raton area, and they would drink at every bar. And this was the night of February 23rd. They would drink at every bar that they went to. But as the night went on, Mr. Boltush, he got drunker and drunker. And the more drunker he got, you know how they say some people can't hold their liquor? Well, he got more aggressive. He got more belligerent. He started staring people down in the bar. He started talking shit. He started trying to start stuff. And according to witnesses that were with him that night, they were at about their fourth bar that night, about 1:40 in the morning, when his belligerence and drunkenness finally got him into trouble. He talked shit to the wrong person, and started a fight. The security and the bouncers came and threw him against his will out of the bar. He tried to re-enter. He got, pushed to the ground, and he got up, and he made a racial slur at the bouncer. He made a death threat that he would kill him, and he left the bar. So they go to a fifth bar, okay, not too far away from this. And at this bar, he goes in there, and he sees a group of black guys by the bar, and one of them is talking to a white girl. He doesn't like that. So he's drunk, he's belligerent, he goes over trying to start shit, right? And then gets into a fist fight with these dudes. He gets his drunken ass whooped, right? Thrown out of the bar again. Okay? Now, once he gets thrown out of the bar the second time, his co-workers, they lift him up and they try to take him home, and he takes a swing at one of them. They restrain him, and then he says, quote, "I'm gonna go home, but before I do, I'm gonna kill me a nigger tonight." So nobody takes him seriously because they're half drunk themselves. Okay, it's been a long night. He's been acting a fool. They've been bar hopping. This is not unusual rhetoric from him when he gets drunk. Everybody knows he's a little racist and a little stupid. Again, he's a loser anyway. High school dropout living with his mama. So nobody's really, he's just your typical Florida, South Florida white trash. Nobody's really taking this guy completely seriously. But he, he's upset at this point. He's drunk, he's belligerent, and now he's angry. Because now he's gotten his ass kicked twice by black dudes. And he's witnessed some black guys talking to a white woman. So when he, incidentally, this is why I don't never go out anywhere. Because I know idiots like this exist in the world. But anyway, there's this dangerous combination of alcohol, of racism, of immaturity, of stupidity, and then of weaponry. So in the midst of being embarrassed, now twice, while bar hopping, he decides to abandon his girlfriend's mom and his two co-workers at this fifth bar. They think that they're gonna go to another bar after he refuses to go home. He ducks around the corner because they were all traveling with him in his car. They go across, the street to another bar. He ducks out and he jumps in his car and he takes off, leaving them there with no way to get home. Later on, they have to catch a cab, okay, because they didn't have Uber back in the day. They catch a cab once they realize that he abandoned them. What they didn't know was that Mr. Boltush, this night, unlike other nights, was determined to make good on his threat to kill him a nigger that night. Since he couldn't win the fight, and since he couldn't win the trash talking match in the bars, he was going to go and find some innocent victim to pick on. And so that's what he did. Now he's drinking in the car and driving, DUI, right? While already drunk and, tipsy and belligerent. And he's driving around the Boca Raton area all night for the next 2 hours looking for him a nigger to kill. Essentially, he has a handgun with him in the passenger seat, and he's just driving around all night, running red lights, running stop signs, and somehow the police don't spot him in time. Now, at this very moment, Jody Gaye Bailey and her boyfriend, Christian Martin, they are pulling up to a street intersection in Oakland Park, Florida. This is at approximately 3:40 a.m. on February the 24th, 1999. Right behind them, a drunken and angry and butthurt Robert Boltush is pulling into the right lane of this same intersection at the stoplight. And instead of running the red light, because at this point of the night, nobody hardly at all is out on the road, so like I said before, he's just blowing through lights, just acting an idiot, being a rebel. But for some reason, he decides, probably to peer into the vehicle to see if, he could start trouble with somebody. He pulls up to this light in Oakland Park, Florida at 3:40 in the morning, and he stops beside the car of this interracial couple. Now, at the time, Christopher Martin had explained that the air conditioner in his vehicle, for some strange reason, about an hour before this, had stopped working. So Jody Bailey, his girlfriend, she was getting a little uncomfortable, so she rolled down the passenger side window. Had she not done that, there's a strong possibility that the person that pulled beside them, Mr. Boltouch, may have never have gotten a good look at them. But once he pulled up beside them with the window rolled down, even in the dead of night with, the street floodlights on at the intersection and along the street, he saw clear as day these two people in this car beside him in the left lane. One of them was clearly a white boy, and another one was a young, dark-skinned black girl. So Christian Martin recalls eerily that he's looking straight ahead, but he notices this car pull beside them very slowly and come to a complete stop. And he said he could almost feel, this is eerie, he could almost feel the piercing gaze of this guy, who also rolled his window down after a second or two and just looked at them without saying anything for more than 45 seconds while they were waiting on the light to turn green. He had been playing some music. What Christian Martin said was he heard the dude playing like some punk rock music, but when he pulled up after a few seconds, he turned the music down. Okay, and Martin noticed that the music was, the volume of whatever the dude was playing had gone down when he pulled up instead of going up, because it was kind of blasting when he was pulling up to the intersection. So he was wondering, what would cause this guy to turn his music down? Did he roll his window up? Did he, what's going on? So he turns and he looks past his girlfriend, who's looking straight ahead. Okay, he says she may have glanced in the guy's direction, but he doesn't recall. But he looks over and he sees Mr. Boltouch, with these piercing blue eyes and this blonde goatee, or blonde reddish goatee, looking right at him with this blank but almost serious look on his face. Now, as a side note, I'm just going to say this. I have this thing myself where when I'm in a situation, and there have been many situations where where I'm out and about in public, minding my business, not bothering anybody, but I notice out the corner of my eye, or I notice while approaching, the front of some place, someone's eyes following me, especially if it doesn't seem like, they're just like in a dead gaze, where they're just daydreaming or something. People tend to do that, like where they're specifically paying attention to me, especially if it's like a weird look. I look back at them, but I also make sure that as soon as I am able, whether I walk around a corner, whether I duck into a public restroom, whatever, if my Glock or my Shadow Systems 9mm or 40 caliber aren't already cocked and locked, I make sure to put a round in the chamber. Okay? Because what that says to me, it can mean several things when somebody is looking at you funny for a long time. Okay? It could mean that they find you attractive. It could mean that they had poor home training. It could mean that they're, just trying to intimidate you by, playing little mind games. People do that a lot. But it could also be an indicator of someone with mental and emotional issues that are having certain rash, irrational thoughts, and you coming across their radar has excited one of those thoughts, for lack of a more wanting term. And in my mindset, since I don't know what their intent is, I'm determined that whatever the fuck their problem is, staring at me in an aggressive stance, I make it my business to be ready. So if I come across that motherfucker again and they decide that they want to upgrade from staring at me to trying to pull something, I'm ready for their motherfucking ass. They also could be setting you up for, to be the victim of a crime, like marking you, for somebody else to blindside and rob you. Okay, that happens too. But if you don't know what the intent of a person is, you should always, first of all, be aware of your surroundings at all times. If somebody, especially at that time of the night with nobody else out on the road, somebody's looking at you like that, you make sure you keep not only your eye, but you keep your mind on them. Let them pull off first. Okay? Give them the road. And if it looks like they starting to follow you or act funny, that's when you need to either drive to a police station, call 911, or pull your gun and have it pointed down towards the door, unless they initiate a threat, but have it pointed in their fucking direction with a round in the chamber. Because we live in a fucked up, dangerous, unpredictable world with people, many of which still act like fucking vicious animals. In fact, many wild animals have more decorum than a lot of human beings, so-called human beings, on planet Earth. Okay? Negro bed wench or not, interracial dating or not, everybody has a right to life unless they did something to harm or take the life of another human being. Whether I agree with them and their lifestyle or not, okay? They do not have to be subject to violence and criminal behavior and become a victim. But see, when you're naive, like these two individuals, you're more prone to being a victim of unimaginable and unpredictable violence because you have not mentally prepared yourself for what other human beings that may look like you but are not like you are capable of. Too many people, especially young people in this world, and a lot of these bed wench types and bed buck types, I'm talking about you niggas too, think the world is a giant party grab. It's not. There are people in this world like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, that was going around killing people in their homes back in the 1980s, that will kill and rape and torture you as soon as look at you. And they'll do it for fun. When they caught up with Richard Ramirez, they asked him, if he wanted to take a psychiatric evaluation to see if he was competent to stand trial. And he told his defense lawyer, he said, "I'm not crazy. I'm just into watching people die." And then he grinned. Yes, you have people like that in the fucking world. So you better be prepared, because if you're not, you might fall victim. So anyway, Christopher Martin looked over, saw the guy, they locked eyes for a few seconds. Bull Tush can clearly see this white boy in the driver's seat with a dark-skinned black girl in the passenger seat. He decides he doesn't like that. So Christopher Martin turns back, light turns green. He goes to make a left-hand turn onto Oakland Park Boulevard and keep driving down. And Boltush initially makes a right-hand turn to go down, to travel east, going down Oakland Park Boulevard the other way. But in his rearview mirror, Christopher Martin can see that as he turns on Oakland Park Boulevard, Boltush's vehicle does a full U-turn in the middle of the street on Oakland Park and runs a red light and starts to follow behind their vehicle traveling west on Oakland Park Boulevard. Now this is the part, especially after dude looked at you like that, this is the part where you need to step on that accelerator. You need to call 911. because we know your little naive white liberal ass ain't got no gun. Okay? You're in trouble. Okay? This dude do a U-turn after evil eyeing you like that. You're in trouble. Okay? You need to kick it up a notch with your common sense. See me? My gun would have already been there. Before I even made a left turn, I would have been getting my gun out and putting a round in the fucking chamber. By the time that dude did that U-turn, I would have been ready for his motherfucking ass. My gun would have been right there, pointed at the fucking door, so that if he tries anything, the muzzle comes up over the surface of that frame towards the window. Boom, boom. I'm getting mine off before you getting yours off. Because that's how I think. That's how I roll. I'm like David Carroll. Half the people in this world I don't like, the other half I don't trust. Okay? I'm not naive to what mankind is capable of, which is why I stay away from most of you motherfuckers. Most of the time. But you know, he sees this guy coming, and he says that he has a deadening feeling in the pit of his gut that something isn't right. But instead of, increasing his speed, he continues to drive the speed limit, and then another light catches him on Oakland Park Boulevard. Mr. Boltush's vehicle pulls up beside his, and this time the rock music is turned back up. They can hear him approaching because he has the music turned back up as he's pulling up beside them. And he starts cussing these motherfuckers out. Nigger this, nigger that, nigger lover, fuck you, you nigger loving motherfucker, you slave master, this, that, blah, blah, blah. And Christopher Martin sees, okay, this guy's an idiot. Now this whole time, his girlfriend, I don't know if Jody, Gaye, poor thing, I don't know if she's frozen in fear or if she's just trying to ignore the guy, but he says she's not saying anything the whole time. Okay? And so Christopher Martin, he tells her to roll the window up. So she rolls the window up, and then he told her, one of the last things he said to her was, just don't look at him. Right? But he said it in kind of a frightened, very low-toned voice, not in a very stern voice like, oh, we ain't worried about that dude. Why? Because Christopher Martin, this white boy, was scared. Right? He didn't know what to do. He couldn't protect her. He couldn't even protect himself. He don't know what to do. He's just a white lip-tard college boy. Okay? He don't know. He don't understand the way the real world works. Right? Not because he ain't been in the world long enough, but because he ain't never experienced nothing like this. And his parents didn't warn him. Neither did Jody Gaye Bailey's parents warn her of the evil that lurks out there on this planet among their fellow man. So they think everybody is as naive and as soft-hearted and as open as they are. They're not. So they go ahead and they continue. He said he felt like maybe he should do a quick U-turn and just gun it in the other direction. He seriously thought about this as they started to pull off from this stoplight. But instead, he decided to keep driving down Oakland Park Boulevard. And they get to a second stoplight. And for some reason, the stoplights kept catching these people. Okay? They just could not get lucky with the lights that night. At one point, Boltush pulls in behind them, almost bumps the rear of their car. He backs off, honks his horn, and then he pulls up beside them again in the next lane, partially opens his door like he's going to jump out. And Christopher Martin takes off. He actually runs the red light this time with Jody Gaye Bailey, but he doesn't speed. He drives the speed limit. He said he only ran the red light because he was afraid that the dude was about to get out the car, come over there and do something. But the dude never completely got out the car. So then they're driving after running the red light, and Robert Boltush, this time he doesn't run the red light. He stays there while they pull off. Now what they should have been doing was trying to put as much distance between him and this crazy motherfucker as possible. Okay? But he didn't. Instead, he's driving the regular 35-mile-an-hour speed limit on this roadway in the middle of the night, 3:40 in the morning. And then they get stuck the very next block. They're about a quarter of a mile away. They get stuck at another red light. Now, Christopher Martin's naive ass, he could have turned left. He could have turned right. He could have ran another red light. No cops out there. And if one does pull you over, great. I got a fucking lunatic on my case. Okay, a fucking racist lunatic. Fucking uptighty whitey. So what if a cop pulls me over for running a red light? That's what we need right now. They didn't have cell phones, or cell phones were around, but they weren't very popular back in the day, so they couldn't call 911. Right? So as they pull off and they reach this second street, they think, okay, maybe the guy's done. You know, he wanted to vent. You know, maybe he had a rough day and, you know, he just wanted to act a fool, want to try to scare somebody or bully somebody. So they're stopped at this light. And then he said he's looking at the rearview mirror. He can see the headlights off in the distance. Because at this point, you know, they're almost a quarter of a mile away on the next block because Christian Martin ran the red light to get away from this dude. But then he said he could hear the engine of the other car revving. And he saw the light turn green behind them on the block that Boltush was still on. And he could see that the distance of the headlights was closing quickly with his car. This dude was no longer driving the speed limit, just kind of following them. He was trying to hurry up and catch up to them before their light turned green again. And Christopher Martin, this white boy, just stays there. You gonna wait for this dude that just showed you twice who he was? You gonna wait for this guy and now he's speeding to catch up to you? So he said he's frozen there, you know, in hindsight, he didn't know why he didn't pull off. But he said this time the guy pulled up to the passenger side. And he said, you know, he slammed on the brakes. He heard the screech. And within a few seconds, he looked over, and the last thing he remembered seeing, while his girlfriend, Jody Bailey, her face was still, you know, front ahead, looking out the front window like she was either frozen in fear or trying to ignore the guy. He said she said almost nothing during this entire ordeal. From the first time they saw the guy, she said almost nothing. Okay? The nigga wake up call was hitting home like a motherfucker, I guess. So the dude slams on his brakes. The music is not on anymore. And he turns and he looks through the passenger side window. And he saw an arm. And then he saw an object. And then he saw a flash. And he heard a series of loud explosions. He felt the shock wave of these explosions hitting and shattering the glass on the passenger side where his girlfriend Jody Bailey was. He opens the driver's side door, gets out, and ducks down instead of speeding off. He ducks down on the driver's side of the vehicle. He hears 7 loud explosions. And then he hears the tires of Boltush's vehicle screeching again. He sees smoke. the guy makes a right hand turn, and as Martin lifts his head up, to level where the windshield was, because he's on the outside of the vehicle at this point, the guy is turned right on another street off of Oakland Park Boulevard, and he's hightailing it out of there. He can see the guy's tail lights. They're, approaching a quarter of a mile away. He's left. It did not register with Christopher Martin, who stood there shell-shocked for about 30 seconds. What happened? Until he crawled back into the car. And he heard his girlfriend, Jody Gaye Bailey, gasping for air. And he looked at her, and there was blood all down her head, all over her face, all over her body. This is strange coming from me, but this is kind of sad. It is. Kind of tragic. You know what I think about these types, but it is. This is tragic. This is fucked up. So it's still that, he says he tries to talk to her, and then for some reason it doesn't register with him for a few more seconds. Oh my God, those were gunshots, and Jody's been hit. It doesn't register with him right away. So he's in a panic now once he realizes that she's been shot. And then he tries to pick her head up. She's still breathing, but she's gasping for air. And he realizes that she's been shot. She's been shot through the right temple. And he, tries to sit her up in her seat. She slumps over again. He realizes that he needs to get her to a hospital. So he jumps in the car. He starts speeding. Middle of the night. Nobody's out on the road. They're out here all alone by themselves. Okay? Joyriding. And then this happens. He doesn't have a compass. He doesn't have a map. Somehow he doesn't know where the nearest hospital is. He later exclaimed that he hadn't gone to get a checkup at a hospital or the emergency room in over 3 years, and it wasn't in that area. So he pulls over to another gas station, jumps on a payphone, calls 911, then runs into the gas station and asks the clerk to call 911, telling them that his girlfriend's been shot. As this is happening, the clerk he's begging the clerk, do they have a first aid kit? Could he please come out and help him with his girlfriend? It was probably one of them foreign Arabs or Indians. They don't care no way. But that dude probably didn't know what to do. All he had to hear was, that somebody's been shot. He's not coming from behind that bulletproof glass or whatever it was. The clerk stays put. And so Martin, he goes back out, and he said if he went back out to check on Jody Bailey, he had this dreaded fear that Boltush, who at this point is long gone, would somehow reappear, or somehow may have followed them to the gas station. He's scared this guy is going to come back. But at the same time, he knows he needs to tend to his girlfriend. So he makes a split-second decision to leave the gas station after not getting any help from the gas station attendant and realizing that his girlfriend was in serious trouble. He doesn't know where a hospital is, but I guess he was thinking, let me just drive. Maybe I'll see something. So he gets back on the street and he starts speeding down the street. A cop that just so happens to be speed trapping, not but a couple of blocks away, he sees this vehicle, this black sedan, and he pulls out, gets behind it, and hits the light. Christopher says he didn't even realize a cop was, behind him, or he had went past a cop until the police officer threw the sirens on him. So he pulls over on the side of the street immediately, jumps out. The cop, he jumps out of his car with his hand on his gun because, he doesn't know why this guy's jumping out so suddenly during a routine traffic stop. And then he explains to the officer that his girlfriend's been shot and that the suspect got away. So the officer goes over, attempts to render first aid, and then calls for emergency services, which had already been called by Christopher Martin and the gas clerk at the gas station just right down the street. At this point, he said her breathing was getting more and more labored, and he didn't know whether he should lay her on the ground beside the car or whether he should keep her in the car and, try to perform CPR, even though he didn't really know how to. So he just kept her sat up in the seat, and then finally she stopped breathing right as emergency sirens were arriving on the scene. Longer story short, they take her to a local area hospital, and she's pronounced dead less than 3 hours later. Now, this guy is shell-shocked. One moment, he's out swirling with his little black girlfriend, and the next moment, they're getting shot at, and she's dying, and then he's the last person to be with her before she slips from this life and into the afterlife, for those who believe in that. Now, about a week later, police are looking for this Boltush guy. They can't find him. So they go to the local news for help. They interview Martin, after obviously telling her devastated family members that she's been murdered on the streets at random, assumably by a road rage gunman. But they didn't know that racism was the motive at the time. They get a deposit sketch of the shooter by Christopher Martin, who was the only surviving witness. And they released that to the local media, who then releases it to the public. And, they basically say, if you've seen anyone fitting this description, please call the Oakland Park Police or the Florida Highway Patrol. So 3 days after that, Boltush's boss at the restaurant, he contacts law enforcement and he says, hey, that deposit sketch that I seen on the 9 o'clock news looks like my employee. So some detectives come out and they interview Boltush's boss, and they find out that Boltush came to work disoriented the next day. He worked second shift, and he was on a payphone in the back in the kitchen, and his boss overheard him telling someone over the phone that something bad happened last night, quote unquote, but he didn't elaborate on what it was, and he seemed like he was a little hungover when he came into work. So he put two and two together, and he said, hey, I know this guy is weird. I know he said certain stuff before. I better call the police and have this checked out. Acting on that tip, police, without a warrant, went to Boltush's home, which was nearby. At the home, they found a vehicle fitting the description of the suspect vehicle that Christian Martin had described on the night of the shooting, February 24th, about 3:40 something a.m. in the morning. The police still don't have a warrant, but they take their flashlight, because this is later on in the evening, and they peer into the vehicle and around the vehicle, which is parked in a driveway of Boltush's mother's home. He's not home at the time. He's over a friend's house, but him being nervous after the shooting, he decides to go out on foot because he's probably figuring I don't know if he saw the news report, but he's probably figuring they've seen this vehicle or they're looking for this vehicle by now. So the police happen to find a shell casing on the ground near the car that fit the car of the suspect description. They get a search warrant to collect that shell casing a few hours later. They hang around waiting for Boltush to return. He doesn't. They take that shell casing and they take it to their crime laboratory and they check it against the ballistics of shell casings that were found at the scene of the crime. They are a perfect match. Now they have reasonable suspicion to charge Mr. Boltush with first-degree murder. A few hours later, they take Mr. Boltush into custody. When he comes back to his mama's house, they interview him, ask him what happens. He denies everything, but they've already charged him with murder. A few days later, Jody Bailey, she has a memorial service at Florida Atlantic University. All her friends, the entire staff and alumni at Florida Atlantic University come out. They're stunned by what has happened to her. Everybody claims, she was such a nice, kind, sweet girl. She went to her native Jamaica in the summertime to help underprivileged children. She did tutoring voluntarily over there, and she would only come back after summer break. And so everybody was just stunned that this happened to her. And then a week later, they have her funeral. Her sobbing white boyfriend that couldn't save her, didn't know what to do, didn't have enough sense to try to escape this maniac that was after him. He's saying that he can't find the words, yada, yada, yada. So a year later, in June of 2000, Robert Boltush, now charged with murder, stands trial. He decides not to take a plea agreement that would have seen him only serve 25 years in prison. He decides to go to trial, knowing that he's facing life without the possibility of, he's actually facing the death penalty. But while at trial, he kind of, after a while, he, kind of realizes that he's in over his head at trial. And so he makes an attempt through his lawyer to try to change his plea to guilty in order to get the original plea deal that the prosecutors had originally offered. But at this point, they figured they're already expending resources at trial, so they're going to finish what they started, and they refuse to let him change his plea deal. He, goes through a motion requesting that the judge let him change his plea, but he had already been told that he couldn't do that. So they go ahead and complete the trial. After closing arguments, the jury deliberates for 12 hours before they come back with a guilty verdict. And soon thereafter, he is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, one thing I did notice in the midst of my research, heading towards the end of the conclusion of this unfortunate story, is that Jody Gaye Bailey's parents, they did express disappointment in the fact that their daughter's killer did not receive the death penalty. Like when the sentencing was read, life in prison without the possibility of parole, which is, under most circumstances, a pretty harsh punishment. They didn't express, satisfaction, but disappointment, because they wanted this cracker to die, which is perfectly understandable. I mean, that's their daughter, that's their baby, regardless of her life choices. Obviously she didn't deserve to be murdered in cold blood, but that stood out to me because for two reasons. Number one, because I am so used to black people being over the top with being forgiving of non-black people for violating them, particularly in court proceedings. We've seen this in high-profile cases, both recently and in the far past, including the Amber Geiger trial, where the white bitch, former Dallas police officer, was sentenced to only 10 years for breaking in a man's home and gunning him down in his own home in cold blood, with no provocation from him whatsoever. We saw this in the case of the Olympic Park bomber trial, the trial of the Atlanta Olympics Park bomber Eric Rudolph, when he was finally captured 7 years later. And the daughter of the young lady that was killed, she expressed sorrow for Mr. Rudolph, and said that she didn't cry for her mother, she cried for him. She was on record as saying this crap. We saw this in the arraignment of Dylan Roof, who was the only person out of this bunch, ironically, who actually got sentenced to death. The young uptighty whitey cracker that killed those 9 black parishioners at that AME church in South Carolina back in 2015, where all the black people who literally, the bodies of their family members aren't even out of the morgue yet, transferred to the funeral home, and already they're forgiving this son of a bitch for gunning these people down while they had their heads bowed, holding hands with him in a prayer circle in the basement of the church. And they're talking about, they enjoyed him, coming to the prayer meeting, and one dumb bitch even said they would invite him back again. I remember Kwesi making mention of this stupid shit, and how they forgave him and reciting Bible scriptures and all this crap. So it was a bit relieving in this case to see black people, have a bit of a vengeful heart in a situation where a white person is accused of murdering or otherwise violating their loved one. But that also brought me to the second kind of issue that I was puzzled by in this, because I was surprised that the feds didn't take up this case, because when you talk about so-called hate crimes, usually the state will either completely hand it over to the feds, or the person will be charged with both state hate crimes, which almost every state has. I think there's still a few states that don't have hate crimes, but most of the southern states, due to the history of Jim Crow and slavery and everything, most southern states do have hate crimes. But also the federal government will jump in and also charge them with a hate crime, like in the case of that police officer in I think also South Carolina, North Charleston, South Carolina or something, back in 2015, to kill that black guy that was running from him. He shot him like 6 or 7 times in the back. Well, I think he was charged by the state with murder, but that case was completely dropped. And then the feds charged him with violating the man's civil rights and gave him 20 years in prison. So, I was surprised that, for whatever reason, the feds, they decided to ignore this case, even though it was kind of high profile for like a week back in the late 90s when it happened. And then again during the trial in 2000. I know a lot was going on back at that time, but I don't know if they just decided, Florida is a pretty hard state when it comes to criminal law and punishment. Just let them handle it, or if they just decided they didn't want to spend the resources. But all I was thinking was, if the feds had have taken up the case, this would have been a very strong candidate for giving a honky the death penalty for killing a black person. So, it's kind of a divided situation because, on the one hand, I mean, she is a swirler, but on the other hand, it's like this dude murdered a black person that had their whole life ahead of them in cold blood. Person didn't do shit to them, and they just roll up looking for an innocent victim because they can't handle the consequences of their actions earlier in that night, and they just decide to take advantage of a completely innocent person that's not messing with them and spill their blood. So I guess it's what they call a catch-22 type of situation. But anyway, now more than a decade goes past. Christian Martin, though traumatized, he moves on with his life. He said, he tried to date other girls a few months after losing Jody Bailey, who he claimed, he wanted to start a life with and have kids with, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But nobody else really felt the same to him. He felt like, he couldn't discuss with people who, what he had gone through with that night, or how special she was to him, yada, yada, yada. And he went through a depression mode, not over losing her, but because he felt like he didn't do enough to save her life. And he, had that, survivor's guilt, survivor's remorse thing that they talk about, that people commonly have in these situations, like, why did I live and she didn't? But then, more than a decade later, after being sentenced, Mr. Boltush, he's been sitting in prison now for 12 years, and then he files an appeal through another lawyer to have his entire conviction tossed so he can get out of prison. And the weak argument, which just further proves how fucking low IQ and low grade this cracker was that he filed the appeal based on two arguments. One was that he was not the court had not announced the 3-year mandatory minimum for one charge that he had, which was a charge for which once he was convicted, he received an additional 30 years for after the life sentence, which was possession of a weapon while in the commission of a violent felony. The mandatory minimum for that sentence was 3 years, but you could get up to 30 years for that. And so they gave him the max on the gun charge, which was separate from the murder charge. He claimed that he felt that the judge was supposed to announce that there was the possibility of him receiving a mandatory minimum, whether he got it or not. This was an appeal that was quick. This was a part of his appeal that was quickly shot down because it was, baseless in the sense that it had nothing to do with why he was sentenced the way he was sentenced. And there had been an earlier case in the state of Florida that stated that, announcing the mandatory minimum in court during sentencing, whether they do that or not, that does not, determine the course of whether or not the proceedings were legal or fair or not. It's not the same as reading someone their Miranda rights as they're getting handcuffed and arrested and charged. And then the second part of his argument at appeals was even weaker than the first, because he claimed that because he claimed that because he committed the crime in at the same time that he was using the handgun, that he should only have to serve the 30 years for the lesser charge of using the gun in possession of a violent crime, instead of having to serve the life sentence for the murder charge. That the judge should have only sentenced him for one crime because it was all one crime and not two. He also argued that another charge should be dismissed, the charge of attempted murder of Christopher Martin should be dismissed because, again, it was all part of one crime, which is also stupid because under Florida and most state laws, you can be charged with every criminal act that you committed while in the commission of the crime that got you the largest charge. Like, for example, if you steal a car, in order to use it as a getaway vehicle for a bank robbery, you can be charged with both grand theft auto and armed robbery. Okay? You don't get the privilege of only being charged with one crime. Now, in some cases, prosecutors will drop other charges, but that's not to benefit you. That's to benefit their case, so they don't have to, focus on pouring so many resources and manpower into, trying to get convictions on all of those cases. They only need to convict you on one charge, and usually that's going to be the most serious charge. But that's not to benefit you unless, y'all come to some type of a plea agreement. So his appeal, which was silly to begin with, was struck down. Obviously, he's trying to get out of prison because, he doesn't want to be in there, but he certainly deserves to be where he is, which he will be for the rest of his natural life. But, it's crazy because while I was looking through this story, once I recovered it and I started poring over it, doing research, reading, I had her name now, and I had the name of the killer, Robert Boltush. And I, started doing some Google searching, getting old news articles from like the Tampa Bay Times. I went on Conan's video. I was able to find a couple of pieces of archived newsreel footage of the actual case itself. Conus Video is one of those archival websites that keeps mostly news, like news, televised news reports, old footage from like the 1980s and the 1990s. But in the midst of researching this case, y'all remember how I said that how in a lot of times when I'm researching one case, I will come across something completely unrelated or that is similar to the topic at hand, but I had not intended to find. Well, while researching Jody Gaye Bailey's case, once I found this article in the Cosmopolitan edition, I came across this other story of a swirler that got murdered that was a 5-time champion on this old reality game show that used to come on in the late 80s through the mid 90s called American Gladiator. Her name was Cheryl Wilson. Okay. And she had this white Italian husband named Juan Manelli. I think he had some Latino in him as well. And apparently, this woman who went by the stage name Jasmine, when she was on American Gladiator, and for those of you who are old enough to remember, American Gladiator was this goofy ass combat hand-to-hand combat sports show where they would have, people come on and have tests of wills against, professional athletes versus like teams of amateurs, to see if the teams of amateurs through exercise, determination, and training could overcome the professionals. This woman was not only a three-time champion, grand champion on this show in 1993, but she also was a star athlete in school. After her tenure on American Gladiator, she married this former boxer, Juan Manelli, and they moved to the Fort Lauderdale area, a suburb in Fort Lauderdale, and they had been married for 5 years. The husband claimed that he knew that she was having an affair with another woman, and their marriage was about to break up. And in a plot to keep her from taking their mixed race biracial child, he had been thinking as far back as 3 years before the incident of murdering her and taking their child and escaping to Puerto Rico. So on this one day in 1997, he decided to act on those thoughts, and he begins viciously beating her up, knocked her to the ground, grabbed a kitchen knife, started stabbing her over and over again. She was strong enough to get up, push him off after being stabbed multiple times, ran out of the home. He chased her down as she left the home and dragged her back into the house, pulled a steel hammer, and started beating her over the head after she had already been stabbed, and then left this woman unconscious, battered, bloody, in a pool of blood right in the middle of the living room floor. And he did all of this in front of their mixed race little daughter. And then he got drunk, called his parents, told them what he did, and asked them for money to leave the country to flee to Puerto Rico. His parents were big enough to say, no, you did this terrible thing. Now you have to own up to it. You should turn yourself in. And eventually police arrested him, and he was convicted in 2000 of murder. Not sure, couldn't find information on what he was sentenced to, but I had seen something about an adjudication. I hope they didn't let this crazy motherfucker out. But yeah, what I took from that, and that was something that I stumbled upon completely by accident. Cheryl Wilson was 30 years old when she died, and Jody Gaye Bailey was 20 when she died. But this all happened in, the same general region of Florida, to my knowledge. And what I gathered from that was that, the nigger wake-up calls for swirlers before they were called swirlers or bed wenches or anything else had been happening even before anybody was really paying attention to it. The writing was on the wall all the way back in the 90s.
A mother and father just learned their daughter has been murdered. A daughter who lived in a house right across the street.
We can handle it. We can handle it. Hold it. No, just lean to me.
Woodrow and Vera Wilson lean on each other for 30-year-old Cheryl Wilson Manelli, a former track star at Northeast High School and Louisiana State University, a grand champion on TV's American Gladiator. Now, a victim, police say, of domestic violence. Overnight, Wilson Manelli was found in her Oakland Park home. Police saying her husband, Marty Manelli, punched her and stabbed her repeatedly. All this while the couple's 4-year-old daughter was sleeping in another room. This morning, Wilson Manelli's family says they knew the couple had problems, but have been trying to work things out.
They had already talked to the minister yesterday. Cheryl and him, and everything was okay, I thought. We never had an argument with Marty. We go to the same church. And we never had an argument. We never talk against him. We just shocked this happened.
Shocked is an understatement for this family. The grief is just too much. Everyone wanting to know how a world-class athlete so powerful and strong could end up like this, helpless in her own home.
But you come from work, and the next thing you know, you get a phone call that your sister dead. How you feel, blank. Just feel blank.
Start 911. Is this an emergency? You need police, fire, medical rescue. Everything. What's the problem, sir? Yeah, my wife had a fight. I think I killed her. You think you killed her? Okay, sir. Is she breathing? I don't think so.
A chillingly calm Juan Minnelli called Oakland Park Police, admitting during the 911 call that he had killed his wife, Cheryl Wilson Minnelli. Cheryl Minnelli had gained fame as an Olympic track hopeful and as a member of the American Gladiator show.
Juan Minnelli.
Juan Minnelli made his first appearance in court this morning. He is being held on homicide charges and no bond has been set. Cops say Minnelli attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house.
It was pretty bad. I mean, he used 4 or 5 different knives and stabbed her numerous times, so it was pretty bad.
Juan Minnelli worked at this doctor's clinic in Fort Lauderdale for the past year. Co-workers say there was never any indication Minnelli was having problems in his marriage.
We're devastated. We're not only saddened, we're devastated, and we can hardly believe what we heard yesterday. I've never seen him get upset. I've never really seen him have a bad day. Every time you asked him to do something, he was perfectly accepting of whatever we asked of him, and he did a very good job.
Now, in one case, you have a white boy that can't protect his girlfriend because he's weak, he's naive, he doesn't understand the way the world works. And in another case, you have a black bitch that, retired from professional sports and want to live happily ever after with her little Italian stallion and found out that dude was fucking loco crazy and he killed her ass. And all this happened in the state of Florida inside of a space of just 2 fucking years. And, I was astonished, just shocked that, like, how the fuck, while searching Kona's video, do I come across another dead wench story from the 90s, before social media, before, internet really took off, before we started coming up with all these pseudonyms and phrases and catchphrases to call one another in this gender war that black people have going on now. That shit like this was happening all the way back then. So essentially, just like, bad wenching itself, swirlers meeting their demises at the hands of white and non-black men is nothing new. And not to be cruel here, because this is a case that happened over 25 years ago. In doing my research, I saw that some of her friends and family members that are still alive, they've tried to move on with their life. But, the memory of what happened to her obviously, still haunts them and still traumatizes them decades later. Christian Martin, he moved on and he appears to have married a woman of his own race and has children. Life goes on. But listen, as a mature Marlboro man, I am human enough to admit that this was a brutal crime. Just because she was bed wenching, and messing with a dude outside of her race, that doesn't mean that she deserved a fucking 9mm bullet through her fucking temple and blow her fucking brains out just because, she was a race mixer. But at the same time, I personally am having a hard time getting over what I had mentioned earlier, which is the brutal irony that this girl literally gave her life for this swirler love in every way imaginable, including right up to the point where she left this world. Okay? She, again, left a top-tier university. University of South Florida is not only one of the top 25 universities in the world, it's one of the top 5 universities in the country, in the United States. I didn't even know it was that high up. Okay? She left this for a much lower tier, much less credible university. She literally sacrificed her education, assumably may have I don't know if she could transfer her scholarship, but she may have given up her scholarship and had to go into a point where she risks going into student debt to attend a much lower ranked university just to be with her white boyfriend. Something that we know she wouldn't have done for any black dude that she was even married to, much less fucking around with or in a relationship with. Okay? She was determined to hold on to this white boy. She probably only downgraded, leveled down her schooling because she was afraid that he might go and find another swirler or, date somebody within his own race and start cheating on her. So she figured, I better get my butt back, over the home side and go to his school. This is the mentality of these females. So determined was she to hold on to this zaddy. Not only did she embarrass herself and abandon a whole scholarship, she put herself in a situation where she had to make the ultimate sacrifice to be with this white boy. Because another white boy was so mentally deranged and fucked up that when they crossed paths in his drunken rage of getting his ass whooped by some black dudes that was hitting on some white girls in a bar, he could not stomach seeing another black person with another white person. And so, in essence, she sacrificed everything for one white boy, only to lose her life as a result at the hands of another. And this white boy that she was with, that she sacrificed everything, including a top-level education, a world-class education, and a full-ride scholarship to, in spite of all those sacrifices that she made for this dude, he couldn't do a damn thing to protect her. He didn't even have the wherewithal when they were able to get distance between them and the racist neo-Nazi skinhead. He didn't even have the wherewithal to step on the accelerator and zoom the hell up out of there and get out of Dodge. Maybe, throw the guy off, do a U-turn and zoom past him, or turn, quick down an alley or a side street and, loop around a couple of times until you lost him. I mean, he was just in a daze, just zonked. A weak white boy that didn't know what to do. He had no clue. He had no street smarts whatsoever. This was the man that she abandoned her top-level education for and wanted to have children with. A dude that wasn't even on her level academically and couldn't protect her. Couldn't protect her not only from niggas, but he couldn't protect her from someone who shared his skin color. He couldn't protect himself. All she saw, and people will say love is love, but that's bullshit. Okay? Nobody is going to leave a top tier school to downgrade to a lower tier school just to be with somebody that they're dating and not married to, unless they're starstruck by that person. If anybody should have been starstruck, her with a 4.0 grade point average, her going to one of the top universities in the world, he should have been starstruck enough by her to try to upgrade, or even to tell her, you know what, honey, don't worry about it. We'll see each other when we can see each other. You get your education. I'm proud of you. I love you. and we'll get married after school and live happily ever after. He let her come down to his level. And the other interesting thing that I found about all of this was, if you read the article that's in the Cosmopolitan, her parents, her mom and dad, they said that they were very angry and distraught that Boltish, the racist killer, didn't get the death penalty. They felt like they had to accept the life in prison. Incidentally, as we know, it's very hard to get white people, and specifically white men, sentenced to death for killing black people. I think I read somewhere there's only been like 2 handfuls of cases in history where that's ever happened. You can count them on 10 fingers, and you'll have a few fingers left. But they also said that they didn't regret coming to the United States. That before this happened, they didn't see, even though they saw some hints of racism, of deep racism in Florida, which is for decades has been one of the havens of the Ku Klux Klan for the last 100 years. They didn't see anything wrong with having, their daughter being in a mixed race relationship, because they had other, people in their family that were in interracial relationships. And that in spite of their daughter losing her life to this nonsense, they don't regret being in the United States, saying that if they had to do all over again, they would have not changed a thing in the sense of moving to the United States. So I get a sense that either the parents, and specifically the mother, because that's usually how these things work, either she didn't discourage her daughter from downgrading, because I'm assuming, as smart as this girl was and as family oriented as she was, she had to discuss her decision or her thinking about making that decision, which is a major move, and not one that any campus, any college counselor would ever suggest. I'm assuming that she had to have spoken with her parents about this decision to downgrade her schooling to a less credible university. That means that her mother or her family in general either didn't try to discourage her from, leveling down to a lower tier university that doesn't even rank in the top 100 nationally, or they encouraged her to actually do it. And the reason for that being, as many of you have acknowledged in the past, a lot of these Caribbean Negroes, just like those African Negroes over there in the so-called motherland, they have the same warped mentality about white skin that these niggas do over here. They're actually worse. It could very well have been that she was egged on to make this stupid decision, okay, by her family. That, oh, you got a white man that's discussing having children with you and marrying you? That's a level up. Forget Florida, the University of South Florida, even though it's one of the top universities in the fucking world. That white man is even higher than that, even though he can't get into the university that you're going to. This is the mentality of the Negro. A weak white boy that not only can't get where she is academically, he can't do anything to protect her. He don't even have enough sense to step on the fucking accelerator. He's gonna let this nut that's been cussing him out, shouting racial epithets for the last 5 stoplights, follow them in every move and just stay with, keep the speed limit. I would have been the hell up out of there. This is where black mental thinking is at. It probably wasn't just Jody Gaye Bailey. It was probably her family too that thought so highly of this dude that she was courting because of his white skin, that they didn't see her downgrading as a big deal. Downgrading schools is a big deal. This is the mental sickness of blackness. Not that, y'all date out and screw and procreate outside of your race, but because you see whiteness as the very height, the very hierarchy of success and status in life. Even when the white person is lower status than you. And another thing, as I come to the conclusion of this really fucked up story, is that this isn't only a lesson to be learned about the mythology that a lot of black people have about being safe and secure, or leveling up, so to speak, with other race groups. Not saying that Jody Bailey had that mindset. I don't know what her mindset was. She just may have been one of them Negroes that, as they so claim, didn't see color, when she decided to start dating this white dude. But also, the other lesson to be learned in all of this is on the side of the perpetrator, Robert Boltush. Now on one hand, he's just a stupid, low IQ, neo-Nazi cracker that, got what he deserved. But on the other hand, I think we've all been in those situations where we've been angry or pissed off about something, and we've had, those dark thoughts that race through our mind. I know I have on many different occasions, and we've had urges to do certain things, but in most cases, most of us decide to turn away from those thoughts and either replace them with something else, or just decide against doing something irrational, because that's what a normal thinking person and a normal functioning person is supposed to do. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to harbor that anger and that rage, and it's not going to, convert into other things, including stress and health problems later on in life. But, this story is also a good lesson for why it's so important to not only manage anger, but also to prep your brain to be able to deal with extreme emotions. Now, this guy, nobody's feeling sorry for this dude. I mean, he brought all this shit on himself. Okay. At the end of the day, he went to bars getting drunk and looking for fucking trouble when he didn't get the result that he wanted, from messing with people at the bars and getting his ass kicked. Then he decides, even in a drunken stupor, that he's gonna go out and pick a fight with somebody that can't fight back. So he got what he deserved. But in legit cases where somebody's messing with you or you feel violated, just so long as it's not emergency situation where your life is in danger, or somebody that you love or care about is in danger. And trust me, this is coming from experience. This is something that I've had to teach myself over the years, because I know I'm not going to even sugarcoat it, bro. As well armed as I am, and as angry as human beings have made me over the years, both online and off, I know for a fact that I would be where Robert Boltush is right now if I did not learn how to exercise Mount Everest levels of self-control. I've told y'all that before, and I'm not bragging. I'm just telling the truth. I know I would have put a motherfucker on the 9 o'clock news years ago, probably even before y'all met me. Okay. So, you have to, we all see things and experience things in life, but if it's not a life or death situation where you feel compelled to, employ deadly force to, defend yourself or someone else, maybe somebody that you love, just walk away from the situation, bro. Like at the end of the day, swirler or not, neo-Nazi or not, either side of the spectrum, I mean, he could have just went home after, having a rough night at the bar. I'm sure that wasn't the first time he got his ass kicked at the bar. You know, maybe he felt some extra type of way. He could have just went home and just, you know, kicked his dog or punched a wall, just slept it off. Woke up the next day, he probably would have been all right. You know what I'm saying? Usually, the emotions people express while they're drunk, most of them will say they can't even remember a lot of that shit. Whether it's a one night stand or whether it's a fist fight, a lot of the stuff that people do when they drunk, they don't even remember that shit, bro. Like, for real. And I think there was like scientific proof of, you know, shit that happens chemically to the brain when you're drunk, where you really don't remember a lot of the stuff that you do when you're intoxicated. Now, because of a stupid decision that he made to harass and then murder and try to murder people that he didn't know, now he got to spend the rest of his fucking life in prison. And, you know, you can tell he's not one of them people that just accepted it, because he's 10 years ago, he filed appeals to try to get out. He filed 4 separate appeals over a course of like 5 years. Okay, so he's not, you know, he don't want to be there, but he has to be there now. And there's no chance of him getting out without the governor or the president, commuting his sentence or wiping his conviction. And that's for a piece of white trash like him. That ain't gonna happen. So now he has all the rest of his life to think about the things that, you know, he could have went on and done with his life if he had to let this girl, Jody Bailey, go on with her life. You know what I'm saying? And that stands for, that really goes across racial lines. Like, that stands for like everybody. Like, and another thing I told y'all, okay, if you're not willing to go out Hamas style, if you're not willing to go out in a blaze of bullets with the police and try to take motherfuckers with you, if you're not gonna do that, don't start no violent act, bro, because there's always gonna be hired guns or non-hired guns. It's, when you do violence, there's always gonna be somebody else willing to do violence with you. Okay, if you do violence to people, whether you're justified or not, there's always gonna be somebody else to meet you at that level. So doing violence and thinking you're gonna get away with it, there's like a 99% chance that you're not gonna get away with it, bro. So think about that shit, bro. You gotta think about that shit. You ain't the only one in the world with a gun. Okay, you ain't the only one in the world with a grudge. You ain't the only one in the world that's angry. You know what I'm saying? I'm really talking to everybody now. You know, black men, white men, black women, white women. Like, you really gotta think about that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I took a couple of months off from work not too long ago just to cool and simmer down from all the shit that I was dealing with. You know what I'm saying? Both at home and at work. Do it, whatever you gotta do to simmer down and just move on. You know, if you can't train your brain, do that. Because it's not worth, I mean, who the fuck wants to live in a prison cell, whether you get raped or not? You know, I hear people always talking about, you know, you're going to get raped, you're going to get raped. There's no proof that everybody that goes to prison gets raped. But who the hell wants to go to a place where, like, you basically don't have your own life anymore? You know what I'm saying? You got to eat shitty food. You got to lay on a fucking hard cot, you know, in a concrete cell with steel bars for the rest of your fucking life. You know, try to avoid violent, you know, sex and you know, other violent offenders that might try to attack you one way or the other. I mean, who the fuck wants to go through that, bro? all that anger over getting his ass whooped at a bar with some shit that he started. How many times has he gotten his ass whooped or worse since he's been in prison? And he done been in prison now for like 25 years. And he gonna be there for 25 more. So yeah, man, think about what you're doing, man. Just think about what you're doing. Just let it go, bro. Okay? Let it go. But it was, you know, it was really so fulfilling to be able to track down this story because I wanted it so bad. Not so much because it was so important, but then it was, because it indicates, you know, a far more deeper rooted issue in Black America, this naivety, this lowering of the guard when, you know, we are around or we are dating or in relationships with other groups of people. But I really just wanted it, for the challenge of, exercising and, reviving that part of my memory. Because as awkward as it was, the way this article seemed to stun me when I was a kid, it was a part, this entire story, learning about it was a part of my childhood at a time when I think I still could be considered, somewhat innocent in the mind, not realizing the way the world works and not realizing how black people, including some of those in my very family, are when it comes to this deifying and worshiping of whiteness, and how unfortunately it has led to the demise of the unfortunate and untimely demise of some of our people, going as far back as, the 1990s, when, I was a wee teenager. But yeah, guys, this has been a deep journey to find this and finally be able to do research on it. I'm glad that I found it. I don't know if the brother who left that comment saying it, hopefully I could find it, or somebody helps me find it, because you want to hear a commentary on this. I hope you're still around, brother, if you made that comment 4 years ago. Thanks guys for sticking with me tonight. And leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think about this whole situation, both of these cases, and how deep the rabbit hole really goes with black people and this race mixing agenda that's been taking place since the slave days. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you later, guys.